Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to episode 83 of Talk4, the quickfire podcast where we ask four great questions to unique and interesting people. Behind the mic today is your host, Skupien. That's me, and let me introduce our very special guest for today, Matt Haycox, who's going to be answering our questions today. Matt, welcome aboard the Talk4 podcast. Please say hi to the fine people listening and just give us a quick rundown of who you are and what you do before we shoot some questions.
Hey, buddy, and hello, fine people. Thank you for having me. Look, I've got a kind of a 30-year story to condense into about 30 seconds. But I'm a business owner, investor, and entrepreneur now. My journey or desire to be in business started. I remember being 8, 9, 10 years old, reading every business book, and I guess trying to get rich quick scheme, and do everything possible to find myself into the business world. Spent my teenage years buying and selling products, squatting on domain names, and again anything I could to try and make my fortune, which never happened. And I first properly started in business when I was 18, running a family business, which was a failing family business. So I got thrown at the deep end, fixing every possible problem. My first success story was in my early 20s. I opened a strip club. And ultimately, over the next 4 or 5 years, became the biggest strip club operator in the UK. Used that business to learn how to borrow money, borrowed a lot of money to do a lot of things. Was riding very high until kind of June 2008, when I realised that borrowing money at expensive rates and paid back over short terms wasn't the best business strategy for me. Had a spectacular bankruptcy. Fell back down to the beginning, started all over again, and I've really spent the last kind of 12 years. Well, obviously the beginning was in rebuilding, but really, I say, moved from one side of the table to the other, and gone from borrower to lender, from business owner to business advisor and investor, and now in the last kind of 10 years or so, I've lent over 500 million quid to UK businesses, and advise, invest, and work with businesses in all kinds of sectors. And now live in Dubai in the sun, but my heart and business is still very much back in the UK.
Very cool stuff. And yeah, I mean, looking at kind of like your backstory and stuff, it's just, I relate to it so much because I've also had like such a entrepreneurial drive since like a really young age, and I actually dropped out of school to get home educated for my tennis journey at around 12. So I obviously COVID was a bit of a knockback, but then I started my own businesses and stuff too, and it was all just kind of like finding my own way and everything. Never went to university, so it's just really interesting to see someone with a kind of a similar kind of drive for like this entrepreneurship stuff. So anyway, question one, I love people's backstories, so just kind of go into a bit more detail there then. So where does this kind of entrepreneurial thing come from for you? Like, where is that source of it? And then just kind of drive us through the memory lane of just getting into that first business and then your first ventures, and obviously getting successful, because you did.
Well, look, I always say that I wanted to be an entrepreneur before it was kind of fashionable to do so. I mean, I'm 42 years old now, so I mean, when we're going back to me being 9, 10, 11 years old, we're talking 30 years ago, long before social media, long before famous business celebrities. And being quite honest, my only real driver back then was I wanted to be rich. And again, in the late 80s, early 90s, it was pretty much the preconception or possibly misconception that the only way to make big money was to own your own business. Therefore, I decided that I wanted to own my own business. Like I said, it was very much a monetary driver. I mean, my father had his own business as well. He was in IT. And he was kind of a first generation business owner as far as his family was concerned. But I guess I started off on the journey just looking to make money, but ultimately found that I do love business, and it's very very much been the right place for me. I guess if anything, that was probably more by luck than judgment. Like I'd got into it to try and make some money, and luckily fallen into something that I love. Because obviously, if I was advising anyone to do something now, I wouldn't be telling anyone to make a career in an activity that they didn't like. So that's where it came from. And what was the second part of your question? Kind of what happened along the way?
Yeah, so going into that first business of yours, then how was that for you? Obviously, you got very successful quite quickly. So how did that all look? And one more thing as well, What was your education like then? Did you go to university and stuff, or did you kind of pursue the business stuff fully and properly go into that?
So I went to university for about 3 weeks. I wanted to leave school. Well, so I didn't want to leave school early, but I certainly didn't want to stay on after I was 18. I wanted to crack on and get to work and get into business. Now, again, we've got to put this into the context of the time. I mean, I was leaving school in 1998, 1999. If you were not if you were not getting a university degree in the kind of mid to late 90s, you were very much considered a failure.
Mm.
Now that never bothered me because I was convinced that I was going to go off and make my millions, and I didn't need the degree. But I think for my parents who were, let's say, more traditional, and for society as a whole, very much saw that degree as something to fall back onto. Because I know, again, for people who, let's say, watch soundbitey videos on Instagram in today's world, and we talk about the fact that university is not necessary, or college degrees are waste of money, etc. Whilst I agree with many of those comments, rewind 25 years, that wasn't really true. I mean, we talk now about a university degree being nothing to fall back on, because it isn't really now. But in the mid to late 90s, it very much was something to fall back on, because it really was your only door opener into what would be considered, a corporate business, a big business. If you wanted to go and work for any big company, no matter how low down the ladder you were looking to start, if you didn't have a university degree on your CV, you were very much at the bottom of the pile. So I guess it was a big step for me, as far as my parents were concerned, to not be doing it. And I went to university for about 3 weeks. Ultimately, I was working at the same time. And I wanted to concentrate on the work. Didn't have time to do the work and the university, and kind of convinced my parents to allow me to leave. Under the proviso that I kind of had a year to make it,
Mm.
if I didn't, then I could go back. I could go back to the university the following September, consider it a gap year, and kind of crack back on. And I say that 23, 24 years down the line, I'm still keeping my fingers crossed that I'm not going to be enrolling as a mature student next September.
I love it.
But
A
yeah,
gap
didn't
year
go to
after
uni.
3 weeks. That's brilliant.
Exactly. But I didn't go to uni, but I had done A level. I mean, I'd done A level business, I'd done A level accountancy, and I'd spent the previous kind of 7 or 8 years reading every piece of business material I could get my mitts on, which again 25 years ago wasn't a lot of stuff. I mean, in today's world, with social media and YouTube and every online course available to you, there's a lot more than there was back then. But I was absorbing whatever I could. So when I first started in business, it wasn't the clubs which I was successful in. It was the family uniform business, which was a very failed business. And I was kind of ultimately given the reins there to try and fix it, which I basically started from scratch with, and rebuilt from zero. And I always say it wasn't that I knew what I was doing; it was that I kind of built it by doing what I knew I shouldn't be doing. Or the other way around, you know what I mean? I didn't know what I should be doing, but I certainly knew what the other people shouldn't be doing, and we kind of built in reverse, if that makes sense. So, I had 3 years of that, with every possible problem. Customers who didn't want to buy from us, suppliers who didn't want suppliers, because of all the histrionics, staff who were unmotivated, banks who didn't want to deal with us. So it was a fantastic learning ground, to deal with every possible problem that could ever be thrown at a business owner. I mean, I always used to say that someone could do 50 years in business and probably not have as many problems as I had to deal with in 3 years. And not only did I have to deal with it in 3 years, it was, I was 18, 19, 20 years old at the time. So fantastic learning ground. Left that business, started the strip club. I wanted to be in leisure. Again, I wasn't. I didn't have any particular qualifications, specifically for the leisure industry. But knew I wanted to sell beer, hang out with girls, and make my millions. So it kind of ticked all those boxes.
Wolf of
That
Wall
business.
Street.
Exactly. Now that business was a success from day one. I probably eat a bit of humility when I tell the story and say, well, it was the right place at the right time. But there was more to it than that. I mean, we had a very clear plan on how to basically try and make a mainstream brand out of a backstreet industry. I mean,
Mm,
obviously, strip clubs even today are not mainstream, but back in the kind of early 2000s, they were still very, very underground. Really kind of owned by gangsters, or best owned by a rich guy as a plaything. They were
sure.
certainly never treated with let's say the principles of normal business, in terms of sales and marketing and recruitment and staff retention and everything else that you would normally do in a business. And I wanted to bring all of that stuff to the industry. We did. The first club was very successful, and off the back of that, I started my journey growing to 2 to 3 to ultimately had 11 clubs by mid to late 2007, and we were the biggest operator in the UK.
It's epic. I mean, you clearly did so well there. And yeah, I'm just painting this picture now, and I'm just seeing like you're just your early 20s, you're just lapping it up, just living the time of your life. You've just got the clubs going, girls, booze, the lot, just having an absolute hoot by the sounds of it. And just going strength to strength, basically. Businesses, like you said, your leisure, property, retail, finance. Then boom, disaster clearly struck. What happened there then when you turned 27 around that period? Like what happened there?
Well, I mean, for anyone who's old enough to remember, or for anyone who kind of studies their business history, I mean, we're talking, mid 2008, which was the onset of the credit crunch. And I say onset because it hadn't really started. We all knew something was around the corner. Didn't probably know how bad it was going to be, or how big it was going to be. But what it meant was that my lenders had stopped, were closing their doors. They were stopping lending to us, were stopping lending to anybody, and we had a business at that point that was built with too much debt. We had a lot of
Mm,
debt. It was all owed back over very short repayment terms. It was all very expensive, and over the previous 5 years, we hadn't really noticed it as a problem because it was a very buoyant economy. It was a very easy market to borrow
mhm.
money in. So ultimately we were kidding ourselves. Every time there was a problem or a financial shortfall, it was very easy to mop it up because there was always another lender willing to lend, and that they were greedy lenders. We were hungry and naive borrowers. And really, it was a match made in heaven that was ultimately going to be a match made in hell. And when we couldn't borrow any more money, we really had to go back to the drawing board and try and restructure the business and lengthen those terms of repayment with our lenders. They weren't prepared to do so. Some out of, I guess, from their perspective, necessity. Others out of naivety. And ultimately, I always say we're a house of cards built on a bed of sand, and when that first domino started to fall, it ripped the lot down.
Mm.
And it's fantastically frightening how quickly things go from rosy to black. I mean, I was probably June, maybe even July at a push of that year. We were, still a 999 credit rating, still, flavour of the month with our lenders. And within 10 to 12 weeks, all the businesses were gone and I'd been declared personally bankrupt.
Wow. Bloody hell, that's crazy. I mean, yeah, I mean that's terrifying as well. But so talk me through this. So I like a concept I've heard quite a bit about in the past is about kind of like good debt and bad debt. So I'm going to actually kind of loosely quote an entrepreneur I'm sure you've probably heard of, Grant Cardone. I think I heard him say
Yep.
something once, and my numbers may be slightly off here or something. So forgive me if it's wrong, but he said something like, if you're 200,000 in debt to the bank, that's a massive problem for you. But if you're like 200 million in debt to the bank, that's a massive problem for the bank. So is that true or is that dumb? Is
100%.
there such a good thing? Is there such a thing as good debt then?
Well, I mean, look, there's good debt and bad debt, but I think you're probably talking about like two separate concepts there. So I mean, so if we just talk good debt and bad debt, I mean that's because I guess to people who don't know any better, debt in itself just has a bad name. So good debt, for example, would be mainstream mortgage debt. You could, but if you're buying a house for whatever £200,000 and borrowing £160,000 of nice clean mortgage debt to buy that property.
Mhm.
Your rent's in excess of your mortgage. You're using the rent to pay down the mortgage, and effectively somebody else is helping you own an asset. That would be something that is good debt, and you could have as much as that debt as you could. I mean, you want to get as much as that debt as possible because it's good debt. It's growing your business. Bad debt would be credit card debt used to buy luxuries, or loans to buy cars, which are just depreciating assets and bringing nothing to the table and just costing you a fortune. So that's probably the answer to that question. The second bit about where they say, if you owe the bank a million, you've got a problem. If you owe the bank, 200 million or whatever, they've got a problem. I mean, yeah, that concept, very very much is true. I mean, listen, whether or not you want to try and leverage yourself into a position to get that much debt to put yourself in a position of control with the bank's a different question. I mean, I think for the man on the street, well, I mean, for 99% of business owners, they're never going to get in a position where they owe the bank so much money that that they've got leverage over the bank, but they may be in that position where they owe smaller lenders that, and to a degree that was the position we were in with certain lenders back in the strip club days, and they were some of the ones who would have been prepared to deal with us because I don't know when I deal with a small lender who might have a total lending book of £5 or £10 million. If I owe them a million, then I'm somewhere between 10 and 20% of their overall business. I mean that is massive exposure, and for me to go bust on them would be somewhere between crippling and business ending for them. Whereas if
Mhm.
I owe £1 million to Barclays Bank, it's lunch money. It doesn't even make it to the second rung of the ladder. I mean, yeah, but very very true concept.
Awesome. Thanks for the clarity there. I really appreciate that. So let's kind of go from there then. So obviously, big problem, kind of disaster period almost, if you will. So you hit rock bottom, and then how did you pick yourself up and rebuild? And why do you walk us through that? Why don't you just give us a few kind of bits of info and some specifics as well on like your rebuilding strategy and mindset towards it, so anyone in a similar spot to that can kind of benefit from it?
Okay, well, I mean, I always say that I don't have an exciting story about how I kind of woke up one day and dusted myself down and had to decided to rebuild, because I kind of started on the next day, just getting back to work and rebuilding, because I didn't really have a choice. I was 27. I had a 1-year-old daughter. I had a wife at the time. A mortgage to pay, bills to pay. And I could have sat at home and cried over Jeremy Kyle, or I could have got back out to work and tried to put some food on the table. And I took the latter choice. The only thing I really could do to earn money at the time was to monetize my skill set. From I looked at a business building perspective, in terms of I didn't have any money to buy assets with. Obviously, I'd gone bankrupt. I didn't have any credibility to borrow money with. So all I could really do is go and sell my skill set, which was in raising finance by that point. I mean, I'd spent the last 5 or 6 years learning how to raise money for my own businesses, and I kind of become a bit of a go-to guy in the local business community for people who wanted money. They were short, or the bank wouldn't deal with them, and I knew every kind of weird and wonderful niche lender that nobody had ever heard of back then, and I started being a finance broker. It was a nice business. From a commission perspective, I could earn myself anywhere between 3 and 10% of the value of the loan. If I was arranging someone a 50 grand loan, 100 grand loan, I mean that was worth from £3,000 to £10,000 for me. So that's how I started, and then ultimately just rebuilt month on month, and ultimately went from being a broker being a lender. After a few years of kind of getting back into the game, I'd probably rebuilt my credibility with some of the people who used to invest in me before. I mean, yes, some people never wanted to ever see me again. Other ones appreciated that I'd never done anything maliciously. It was just a case of, I guess, young naivety, and that they were as naive and greedy for lending as I was for borrowing. So yeah, it was just a case of kind of getting back at it. And like I say, I don't have this kind of general speaking to his troops, motivational speech of what it was that got me working again, and that I was so down. I felt I didn't have a choice, and ultimately that's how I kind of approach most of my days. I mean, obviously there's the old adage of discipline's more important than motivation, and I guess it was really a variant on that for me. That I could. Yes, I could have tried to think of a way to motivate me if I was depressed, but the reality was, motivated or not, by the end of that week, I had a 1-year-old who needed nappies in my looper, and a missus who didn't want the house repossessing. So it was out of necessity rather than anything else.
Yeah, it had to be done. It was duty, and I really it's so easy to just kind of keel over and think the world's just gone down the hole basically, and then just kind of let that get to you. But I love that you just you got up and you got on with it, and look at you now. It's epic. So you talk about kind of like credit, and that's obviously kind of personal credit with people you were obviously in lending with. I imagine your credit score must have taken an absolute flamethrower to that after that whole thing as well. So how do you actually kind of rebuild that? Because I don't know much about it. So I'm just interested, like, what are some of your sort of credit score tips, if you will, especially if you've kind of been in a place where it's just been absolutely just obliterated?
Well, I've actually recorded a video a couple of years ago about something like 15 tips for how to improve your credit score. So we'll have to put a link to it in the show notes. I'll find it. I'll send it to you later. But I mean, look, I guess in answer to your question, yes, at the point of going bankrupt, your credit score is down to zero, and obviously that will, during the first year of your bankruptcy, during the year that being bankrupt lasts, you're not able to borrow any money, even if anyone wanted to lend it to you anyway. I mean, it's effectively a legal exclusion that that's something you can't do. Go and incur further debt. But once you're out of the bankruptcy, you can. Now, obviously, most people aren't wanting to deal with you at that point, but I mean, really, your credit score is just, I guess, it's your reputational algorithm. If that's one way of putting it, and your score gets better by doing what you say you're going to do in the financial world. So if you do things, or you show yourself to be a person of good standing financially, these are all things that help you improve your credit score. So what I guess what I did was I would start undertaking activities that would make me look better. So making sure I've got rent in my name, making sure I'm registered on the voters roll, making sure my utility bills, etc., are set up and paid by direct debit. Then I go out and start to borrow some money to pay back. Now, obviously, you say, well, who's going to lend to you? Most people aren't, but there are specialist companies that that only lend to subprime credit type people. And you're obviously not borrowing much money. We're talking about getting a credit card with a £200 limit. We're talking about getting a loan for £500 or £1,000. And even though I didn't need that money, or even though that credit card was of no use to me whatsoever, I would take them and I would use them because what I was doing was rebuilding my financial reputation. So that £200 credit card, I mean, yes, it was neither use nor ornament to me in day-to-day life, but I stuck 3 or 4 iTunes type subscriptions on there to make sure that I would always spend the £200, and then as soon as the month end came and the bill came in, I would pay that bill in its entirety by direct debit. And that would happen for 4, 5, 6 months, and then the credit card company would say, oh, you've been a good boy, we're going to increase your credit limit from £200 to £500. And it's there's no rocket science to it. It's about doing that and following that process. And then I got a mortgage on a property that I didn't particularly want or need that property, because no one was going to be giving me a £700,000 mortgage on a £1 million property. But yes, I could get a 40 grand mortgage on a 50 grand property, and it was just, there's no quick answer here. It's building back that reputation, and all your credit score is an algorithmic reputation, representation of how you behave in finance. And like any reputation, it takes a long time to build, certainly to rebuild. And my advice to anyone who has got a problem with the credit is to start working on it as soon as possible. Because again, I actually didn't. I kind of took the view. I went bankrupt in 2008, and I took the view at that point that, whatever, my credit's so shot that I don't even need to bother looking at it again. I'll never get a credit card again. And because I didn't need the £200 type credit cards, I didn't even bother trying to get them. And then probably it wasn't until 2013, 2014, literally 5 or 6 years later, that I woke up one day and thought, what, I could do with some credit. Let me go and see what my credit score's like. And I looked at it, and it actually wasn't bad. It wasn't horrendous. So it wasn't good, but it wasn't horrendous. And the reason it wasn't horrendous was because obviously I hadn't done anything wrong. But the reason it wasn't good is because I didn't really have anything to show that I was good. It was just, I was just there, I didn't really have anything negative on it by that point, because it was years after my bankruptcy. So the slate had been wiped clean, but I didn't have anything positive. I didn't have anything positive on it either, because I hadn't been doing anything positive to rebuild that reputation. So that's when I started the journey. But what I should have done is start that journey 5 years earlier.
Well, this is really good info, and I'm definitely going to take a look at that video that you made for sure. Make sure it's somewhere on the screen right now or something for the listeners and everything. But in case it's not in that video, I'm sure it is, but in case it isn't, do more credit cards on a direct debit. Does that translate to better standing and stuff then? So like if you just have one that you're consistent with doing well on, is that the same result as if you had like 5 or 6 or something? Because I know some people who've got like an absolute stack of them. So does that translate?
There's probably different answers or different benefits there. There's one of the things that the credit reference companies will look at is what's your available credit. But then that's a good thing. It's a good thing, for example, that you've got 100 grand worth of available credit compared to somebody else who's only got, say, 10 grand worth of available credit, because that shows that lots of people have put a lot of trust in you. But if you have got those cards maxed out all the time, and and they're always at like a 95 grand limit because you've used them, and you're just paying and you're not paying them off at the end of each month, you're just paying the minimum payments, and you're running at that kind of ceiling, then that will be something that counts against you, because you've always got very, very heavy kind of hard utilization. So that would work against you. Look, from a flexibility or a safety perspective, I would probably rather have 5, 10 grand cards than 150 grand card, because again, sometimes these things are a bit of a black art, and you never know when someone's going to turn against you, and you could wake up tomorrow with a lender having a change of heart, and all of a sudden they've pulled that credit limit, and you've gone from 50 grand to 0. Whereas, if you've got yourself spread across 5 cards, you might go from 50 grand to 40 grand. But also we're talking in bigger numbers for some of your listeners here. Taking this back to the basics, the advice stands whatever amounts of money we're talking. And I think one of the biggest mistakes anyone can make is not using things like direct debits, and not keeping on top of the bills, no matter how small they are. Because as a lender, I can tell you that one of the first things we look at when someone's borrowing money for the business is their personal credit profile. And people may say, well, that's not, why do you do that? It's not fair. The business is borrowing the money, I'm not borrowing as an individual. But the reality is that most small businesses and their owner are one on the same. If you you own your limited company. You're the 100% shareholder. Everything that happens in that business is down to you, and vice
Yeah.
versa. So I want to look at you as an individual, and if I can see that you're, you know, bouncing £20 payments here, and you're late paying your rent by a couple of days, even though it's not big amounts of money and it's not long periods, because you might go, well, what are you complaining at? Yes, I was supposed to pay it on the first, but I still paid it on the third. You know, what's the difference? Okay, look, in the grand scheme of things, the money's neither here nor there, but it just shows that as a person, you're disorganized. At best, you're disorganized. At worst, you're kind of under pressure and robbing Peter to pay Paul. And the best thing anyone can do with their credit profile is just show that they do what they say they're going to do when they're going to do it.
That's some great info there, man. And yeah, this leads really well into my fourth and final question then. So as a lender, let's flip the seats here then. So as a lender who's lent over, well, in your fantastic Leeds accent, 500 million quid and into UK businesses, can you give us a few of like the data points you look for, or lesser known things that individuals and businesses can do better to make themselves a more attractive investment? You've obviously just given us one there, but have you got any more kind of the little ones that we can work on?
Sure. Well, I think you need to approach borrowing money as as a project, or as a business opportunity, and there's a right way to borrow it, and a wrong way to borrow it. And what you need to be doing is presenting a very clear case to that lender of why you want the money, what you're going to use it for, and how you're going to pay it back. And you need to have all your financial information in order. So that is accounts, that's bank statements. And for me as a lender, I'm almost more interested in the bank statements than I am in the accounts, because when you look at a set of accounts, I mean they show a kind of a picture at a point in time, whereas the bank statements show very clear day-to-day behaviour. I mean, some accounts could say, "Oh, that you've made 200 or 300 grand worth of profit," but it's quite easy. It's quite easy to make up accounts. It's very difficult to make up bank statements. So I want to see that. Depending on what kind of a lender you're dealing with, they're probably going to want some kind of security. I mean, someone like me takes very hard security. Plant, machinery, vehicles, property, that kind of stuff. If it's a lender who's doing more of a cash flow based lend, then that's when the bank statements are very, very important. You don't want to be over leveraged. You don't want to have lots and lots of other lenders in there, and that's when we talk about good debt and bad debt. Really, okay, it's not an issue to have lots and lots of good debt, but in today's world, there's a proliferation of alternative lenders, kind of cash flow type lenders, who will make 10 grand, 20 grand, 50 grand business loans that are all paid back over 3, 6, 9, 12 months, very short term. Having one of those probably not such a problem, but when you start to see that someone's got 3, 4, 5 of those on there, you can see it's a business under pressure. Other things, and again, you can say that these things aren't fair and they're not right. I'm not saying whether they are or not so relevant. Telling you the way it works. If you've got a personal bank statement that's littered with with credits or debits to Betfred or William Hill, then even if you've got the money to service the loan, someone's going to look at that and say, "Hang on a minute, do I want to be lending money to a gambler?" So yeah. I guess I could go on and on and on with examples here, but I guess what I'm really saying is borrowing money is a job that you need to prepare for, and you need to get your house in order and put your best foot forward when it comes to going to a lender, because you only get one bite of the cherry.
That is some wicked info. What a way to end it. So, Matt, that has been our 4 questions for today, and I feel like my mind has expanded from all this. I'm loving this. I'm definitely going to check out your videos and stuff. But right, shameless plug moment, the classic. Sure. Matt, feel free to take a minute and promote anything that you're working on, you want people to take a look at, or just something you believe in. This is your minute to plug away, man.
Well, you can get me online at matt-haycox.com. That's MATT and HAYCOX with a hyphen in the middle. I'm on all things social at the Matt Haycox. That's THEMATTHAYCOX. I have a YouTube channel. I'm pretty busy on Insta. And as we talked about earlier, I have my own podcast as well, where I interview inspirational, exciting, educational guests, celebrities, sports people, as we talked about, nuclear submarine captains and everything else. So do that on a weekly basis. That's called the Matt Haycox Show. You'll get it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. So find me online, add me on something, and I interact with people on a daily basis. So if you've got a question, do send it. I do reply to all my messages.
Great stuff. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining me today for the Talk4 podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on, man.
Thanks a lot, buddy.
It's been awesome. And thank you guys for listening. This has been episode 83. And if you'd like to listen to the past episodes, go and have a look at the channel. And if you'd like to listen in for our future ones, make sure to hit that subscribe button and spread some love by leaving a like and a comment. Signing off for now.